com a última palestra do dia de hoje. E para isso, então, nós vamos ter a honra agora de receber o professor Simon Shibley, professor da Sheffield Hallam University e do Sport Industry Research Center e membro da UK Sport. Welcome, professor Simon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here. It's a great privilege to be invited to Brazil, for you to listen to the experiences from the UK. So can I thank Maria Teresa for inviting me, and some of the people who don't get the credit they deserve at functions like this are my translators. And they do a great job in accommodating people like me who only speak one language. So thank you very much for accommodating me in English. It's very much appreciated. Last night when we had the opening ceremony, I stood down here and I listened to your magnificent national anthem, and I didn't recognize the Brazilian national anthem. I don't recall hearing it many times before, and while it was playing I thought to myself, in Rio 2016, how many times will we hear this music? Or in other words, how many gold medals will Brazil win? And I would like to finish my presentation by giving some kind of forecast as to how I think Brazil will perform in 2016. Now, some of you may laugh. Some of you may know of me because in the Epoca magazine before the Olympic Games, there was a pullout, and I wrote this piece that said Brazil would win 6 gold medals and 24 medals in total. And in reality, Brazil won 3 gold medals, 17 medals in total, and therefore my predictions were pretty hopeless. So again, I'd like to thank Maria for inviting me over to have someone talk to you who doesn't know what he's talking about. What I will try and do in the next hour is to redeem myself and leave you with some sensible estimates of how Brazil might form. So, the title of my presentation is Elite Sport in the UK from 1982 until 2012. And there's a subtitle to the presentation, which is From Imitation to Innovation. And why I use this is when the UK first started investing in elite sport, we copied what other people were doing, principally Australia. And Australia copied East Germany. So basically we were doing a clean version of what East Germany had been doing in a context that was sensitive to the UK. And without drugs.
Wow. Martin.
We have now matured as a system, and rather than copying other people, our system is about looking for sources of competitive advantage, doing things that other people don't do, so that we can be dominant in certain sports. And you will see track cycling, rowing, and to a lesser extent sailing. But at home, equestrian, we won 3 gold medals in the 6 equestrian events. So, in the next hour or so, this is the journey that I'm going to take you on. First, we look at UK policy. And I'm going to back that up by looking at investment. And we've seen some very interesting investment figures in Brazil, and performance. And one of the things I like looking at is cost effectiveness. What is the cost per medal? And sometimes it can be eye-watering how much people invest to win a medal. And then, round about halfway, we'll change the focus. We'll start looking at the host nation effects and how the hosts for the last 7 Olympics have performed. We will look at Brazil's performance in the history of the Olympic Games, and then I will conclude by making a series of forecasts as to how I think Brazil will perform in its host Olympics. Now, in the UK, we have an expression called death by PowerPoint. It sounds as though you have it in Brazil as well. Early on, there's 2 slides where there's a certain amount of reading I have to do, but it will just be 2 slides. Okay, it's pretty important points. So I apologize in advance for reading these things to you, but they're very important bits of context, and the rest is all pretty simple text and pictures thereafter. So I'm from Sheffield, and that's the one thing I have in common with Jessica Ennis. She lives in Sheffield, she studied at Sheffield University, and unlike a lot of athletes, she didn't leave her hometown to train. She trained at the English Institute of Sport in Sheffield. And she got married about 2 weeks ago. So there's a lot of broken hearts in England. So, here to a little bit of reading, but it's important. This is how policy has evolved in the UK from 1982. And there are 3 sentences I need to read to you. So, I'll read the sentence, and then I'll give you an explanation, next sentence, so it will not be too painful. So the first sentence, the council, and that's the Sports Council for GB at the time, will continue to emphasise excellence and to encourage it in numerous ways, but sees its role mainly in better use of proven approaches rather than seeking any major new actions. And that's why I've subtitled the presentation from imitation, because basically we were doing nothing new. Making use of existing proven approaches. So just copying what other people were doing. Now this second sentence, this shows you a kind of slightly dismissive attitude towards nations who were taking a strategic approach to elite sport. Some countries invest vast public funds in special facilities, training programs, and financial and status rewards for elite athletes in order to win prestige and trade internationally. So some nations, but not us. We are the plucky Brits, the amateurs, the Corinthians, the people who succeed against all odds. That was the thinking at the time. And this is the key sentence, because this is the journey we have come on. It is neither tradition nor policy to treat top-level sport in this way in Britain. So that, 30 years ago, 31 years ago now, that was our policy. That we didn't buy this elite sport policy business. That was for people like Russia or East Germany. We were plucky amateurs. We'd have a British athlete coming up the line, ready to win a race, and he would stop and say, "No, after you. I will take silver or bronze, that's good enough. You have the gold." We were gentlemen and gentlewomen in elite sport. Not anymore. Now, let's fast forward 30 years. UK policy in 2012. This is a statement made by the Chief Executive of UK Sport to the BBC. And this is what she said. We, that means Great Britain, will be in the top 4 in the medals table at the London 2012 Olympics and second in the Paralympics. And we will win more medals across more sports. So there couldn't really be a more significant shift of policy than what you're looking at there. And in some regards, this is ironic because the IOC does not recognize the medals table as an order of merit. It simply publishes the medals table in descending order of gold, silver, and bronze for information purposes only. And yet, here we have a nation targeting a ranking in that medals table which is for information only. It's a very, very big shift in the way in which we do things. And because we did so well in London 2012, 65 medals, the bar has been raised even further. As I'll show you when we look at investment figures, we have increased funding for the Rio cycle by 7%. This is unheard of. Normally, after the host nation edition of the Olympic Games, funding gets slashed. We've increased funding, and in return for this increased funding, the target for Rio 2016 is to win 66 medals, one more than London 2012. And this is official UK sport policy. So what I want to show you now is the impact of money. This is the UK's performance in the Olympic Games from 1984 to 2012. And the point I want to make is that in 1984, we did better than we should have done because the Los Angeles Olympics was boycotted by the Eastern Bloc nations. So we won more medals, particularly bronze medals, after you, than we would ordinarily. As soon as normal order was re-established, you can see progressively in Seoul, in Barcelona, and here in Atlanta, the meltdown, the wheels came off our elite sport performance, and we have 3 periods of declining performance. Now, many people say that for the UK, Atlanta was a focusing event. This means a nationally catastrophic event that causes a radical shift in policy. This wasn't quite true. We had already decided before Atlanta to begin investing in elite sport. We had a national lottery created in 1994, but we had to change the rules because previously the money could only be used for capital expenditure and not revenue. So UK Sport was created in 1997. The rules as to how money could be changed in 1997. And the first impact of that money you can see here in Sydney. A huge improvement from 1 gold medal and 36th place to 11 gold medals and 10th place. And this vindicated the policy. More money in, or in this case, just some money in, equals more medals out. And in Athens, we gained 2 more medals, and then there was an explosion in Beijing. A huge improvement, a kind of pre-hosting effect, if you like. And then, in the home edition of 2012, our best performance since 1908 with 65 medals. So what this proved, if you like, proof is the word, that the money was making a difference. And we've changed as well. After the Sydney Games, UK Sport discovered that 5 other nations from Europe performed better than the UK. Russia, France, Germany, Italy, and perhaps most surprisingly, the Netherlands. And although UK Sport was pleased, their attitude was, why have these other 5 European nations performed better than us? What can we find out about what they are doing? And so one of the things that we did was we joined the SPLIS program. The UK was a founder member of SPLIS 1, and what you can see on the screen is the scores for the 9 pillars. Now this pink line on the inside, this is the average for the sample. On the outside, the blue lines, is the score for Great Britain. So without going into too much detail, what you can see is that for 7 of the 9 pillars, the UK was performing better than the sample averages. Where we were relatively weak was, as Viola said last night, on talent ID and on scientific research. When we look at these pillars, these are the 2 pillars that I want to focus on to show you how we have made continuous improvement and turned weaknesses into a form of strength. So let's take a look at the 9 pillars and have a walk through our policy. So pillar 1 is the finance, and this is our investment in the last 5 cycles. This is Sydney and this is the Rio cycle. Now, it's slightly deceptive. The figures here for Sydney and Athens are not directly comparable with Beijing, London and Rio. And the reason for this is that in the Sydney and Athens cycles, UK Sport was responsible for podium level athletes only, and the development level athletes were the responsibility of the home nation sports councils, so primarily Sport England. The amount of money that they spent on development level is unknown. So the best comparators are the last 3. So in Beijing, £235 million, 264 million in London, and 284 for the Rio cycle. So whatever way you look at this, the key point of note is that the level of investment made in elite sport by the UK is increasing. And it's rather spectacular that it should increase after hosting the Olympic Games. Now, my argument here is that money is not the cause of the success. Money is a catalyst which enables the success to happen if you do the right things with the money. So Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they've got plenty of money, but they'll never produce elite athletes in the same way that the UK does. So the argument here is that we have used this money pretty wisely. So the components of Pillar 1. And there are 3 key points. Elite sport in the UK is concerned with Olympic and Paralympic sports only. We don't fund golf, although golf is an Olympic sport now. We don't fund motor racing, horse racing. It is very clearly focused to Olympic and Paralympic sports, and within those sports, we do not fund professional sports. There is no money for tennis, there's no money for golf, no money for rugby sevens, and in 2012 there was no money for football. These sports can fund themselves. So, one way or another, it's a fairly focused funding approach. The next thing is that we don't give money to anybody. We give money to national governing bodies which are recognized by their international federation. And within these national governing bodies, there has to be a performance director. One person who is personally accountable for the performance of that sport in elite sport. And he or she will write a clear strategic plan, complete with targets. So a sport like hockey might bid for £15 million for a cycle, and they'll say, give us £15 million, this is what we will do with it, and we will deliver one medal. And in London 2012, we paid £15 million for one bronze medal in hockey. We've heard about governing bodies in Brazil needing to modernize and having to have excellent governance. That's one of the key things of our system, that governing bodies have gone from having limited funds to, in the case of some, being responsible for tens of millions of pounds over a cycle. The only way that they can justify that expenditure is by having excellent governance. There's been a huge investment in modernizing the governing bodies so they can use this money wisely. It's very competitive. There are 26 Olympic sports in London 2012, 39 disciplines. They would all like some money. There's a surplus of demand for the money and a fixed supply. So in simple economics, when supply is fixed, demand increases, the price goes up. And that means these governing bodies need to have better governance, higher targets, and they're subject to regular review. And as I'll show you a bit later, there is a very real system and threat of sanction and reward. Governing bodies that perform well will be rewarded, governing bodies that don't perform well will be punished, and in some cases punished severely, as in losing 100% of their funding. Like table tennis. Olympic table tennis. Paralympic table tennis, very good. So, just a reminder then, this is the impact of the money. We did nothing, we didn't invest, we went backwards. We began to invest, we improved. Now, this is very, very unusual. If you look at the history of the Olympic Games, there are very few nations who improve the number of medals they win 3 or 4 editions on the trot. The only parallels that we would have would be perhaps East Germany, China, and to a lesser extent, Australia. Normally, you take a nation like Brazil, it'll be up one year, down the next, up, down, a random pattern of fluctuation. So this is a very unusual pattern of performance. Now, this next image, this is our pillar 2, organization and structure. This is a very complicated picture, and I don't show it to you to try and impress you. The point I'd like to make is that despite the very complex structure we have, we succeed. But we have a joke in England. Somebody might come up to you and say, can you show me the way to Sheffield? And we say, well, I wouldn't start from here. And so too, if you're designing an elite sports system, if this was your structure of sport, you wouldn't start from here. So we succeed quite often despite ourselves rather than because of ourselves. So this is not meant to impress you. There are, however, probably 3 positive points about this. The first one here, this is UK Sport, the agency for elite sport. And what you can see is that it is separate from the department, the government department, and it is slightly separate from the sports cabinet. So the expression that we use is that it is a body which is at arm's length from government. And this means that you can avoid political interference. You trust professionals who know what they're doing to get on with it and don't interfere. So that's one good point. The second good point is that UK Sport has responsibility for elite sport only. It doesn't dirty its hands with the grubby business of grassroots sport. That is the job of Sport England and Sport Scotland and Sport Wales and Sport Northern Ireland. These are the home nation bodies that deal with the grassroots. So they are focused in UK Sport solely on elite performance. There was an attempt to merge the bodies, but it didn't work. And because we performed so well in London 2012, it just went off the agenda completely. The third good point is the relationship between UK Sport and the British Paralympic Committee and the British Olympic Committee. You know, we talk in Pillar 2 about avoiding duplication and knowing who's responsible for what. Well, there is potential conflicts here, but they've been sufficiently adult to work these arrangements out between them. So essentially it works like this. UK Sport is responsible for the 8 years from development through to podium, and the British Olympic Association is responsible for the last 8 weeks. So holding camps, the delivery of the games, and so on. So that's a simple way of looking at it. But, you know, you wouldn't start from here if you were designing an elite system from scratch. Pillar 3. I did some research on the UK prior to coming here, so what you're going to see now is a world exclusive. It's often held that in order to produce elite athletes, you need to have a broad base of participation, and that by some kind of sporting osmosis, talent will filter up from grassroots to elite level. Sadly, there's no evidence in the UK to support this theory. Let's just have a look at this line here. The blue line, this flat line going across the graph here, this is the adult participation rate in sport in England. And it goes from 34% in around about 1996 to 36% in 2012. So when you allow for sampling error, essentially that's a flat line. Like somebody who's died on a cardio machine. So our participation rates are flatlining. Now, when we look at total medals, what we see here, this is 1996, increase, 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 increase. So, looking at that, there doesn't appear to be any relationship between the grassroots and elite sport. And if you talk to people, say, in British cycling, they would say what we need to do is to find people with the correct physiological, psychological, and behavioral traits and take them out of the system of grassroots and put them into an elite sports system. And this is one of the weaknesses which we have addressed, is instead of relying on clubs and looking at performance results, we go looking for the talent that we're after. And I want to spend a bit of time on Pillar 4, because it was a weakness, and now I think it's a strength. So we have a slide for each of these 4 points. Point 1, one of the things that we do is what we call frontline solutions. The second point is we have an education program around talent ID. We have athlete development research, and we do benchmarking. And I think you'll be quite interested in some of the things that you're going to see and hear, because it's a clear indication of how we've moved away from imitation to innovation. Just a reminder here that in SPLIS 1, talent ID was a relative weakness for the UK. So how have we addressed this? Well, last night, Vila told you about some of the frontline solutions. So things like sporting giants. So if we take a sport for rowing, like rowing, for example, in rowing what we're looking for is big, tall people with long levers. Now don't look at me, nothing like me. Big, tall people with fantastic capacities to do physical work. And you can test for this. And we hold sessions where we say to people, right, if you think you've got what it takes to be an elite sports person, come to Loughborough University, have a go on the ergo machine, let's see what you can do, let's see how high you are, how heavy you are, how much power you can produce, and whether or not we can pick you up and put you into an elite sport program for, say, rowing. Now, why I really like this Sporting Giants program is we had a really bad start in London 2012. We didn't win a gold medal for, it seemed like a long time. But the first people who won a gold medal were 2 women in the rowing, and one of them, Helen Glover, had been identified by Sporting Giants. Fighting Chance, this is a good example. We had Fighting Chance in 2009, and this is the thinking behind Fighting Chance. There are loads, many martial arts, kung fu, karate, capoeira, you could go on and on and on. But the only martial arts in the Olympic Games is Taekwondo. In Taekwondo, there are 8 events. But each nation can only contest 4 of those events with only 1 fighter. So 8 events, you can only contest 4 medals. So it's absolutely essential that you have the best possible fighters taking part in those events. So we look for people in other martial arts who might have the ability to be trained in Taekwondo. And I'm very pleased to stand here and say in front of you that we won a gold medal and a bronze medal in Taekwondo. And the bronze medal, a guy called Lutolo Mohammed, was a graduate of the Fighting Chance program. So we're having another one. And the only other thing that I would say about these frontline solutions is that it's not confined to Olympic sport. You'll see that we've got Paralympic potential in 2009 and currently another round of Paralympic potential going on in 2013. Now, if we take education, one of the things that we have realized is that the ability to profile talent is a skill in its own right and a profession almost in its own right. It is a job of people who do talent ID to identify the raw material for coaches to produce athletes from. We have very sophisticated tracking and progression systems. And a very good example is this performance funnel here. And this is for the 100 meters in athletics. Basically, if you want to produce an athlete who is in the medal zone for the 100 meters, 5 years before a competition that you're targeting, so let's say you want to produce a 100 meters medalist for 2013. 5 years ago, that athlete should have been capable of running 10.15 seconds. And every year, for the next 5 years, he should be able to improve by 500ths of a second. So that when it comes to the targeted championships, he's running 9.9. And against the Jamaicans, 9.9 might not even be enough to win a gold medal. But to be in the medal zone, that's what you need to be doing. For every single event, in athletics, in swimming, where time or distance is what you are judged by, there is a performance funnel. And so we're tracking our athletes through these performance funnels to identify the ones who are in the final zone and here in the medal zone. So it's quite a big shift in the way we do things in the UK. The other bits of education, we find that many junior athletes get lost from the system in the transition from being a junior to a senior. So we try to mitigate this by having things like age group championships and by controlling athletes' exposure to competition so that they don't get demoralized and that each time they compete they're making some kind of progression. And finally, just to show how detailed the thinking is, we have high performance parenting. There is a realization that one of the most important inputs in an athlete's network is the influence of friends and family, particularly parents. So positive parenting helps produce elite athletes. Inappropriate parenting causes dropout. So not only do we educate the athlete, we also educate the parents. This will become a recurring theme, is research. And what we're doing around with this slide here is athlete development research. So we analyze the outcomes of frontline solutions. There's no point doing sporting giants unless it has positive results. So every program is evaluated. I think so far 7,000 athletes have been through the system, as have 100 coaches, and we've produced 100 elite athletes who otherwise might not have been picked up through the system. And as I said earlier, some of them have gone on to win Olympic medals. These next 2 points, trainability, there is a view that the determinant of producing an elite athlete is the ability of that athlete to subject him or herself to being trained. And if they will bend to the will of the coach and the performance director, you can make them into an elite athlete. So we have indicators to see how trainable is this athlete. To what extent does he respond to the inputs made by performance directors and coaches? And we also have this best from rest analysis. What are the differences between somebody who is consistently successful at the highest level? So in rowing, for example, someone like Sir Steve Redgrave or Matthew Pinson. Why are these people capable of winning 5 or 4 gold medals compared with other athletes who just make finals? and we take that knowledge and we factor it into the programs. And then this other thing here, time compression. When we find out what works, what makes a difference to an athlete or to a program, we then set about saying, well, okay, we know that this works. How can we do it quicker? How can we bring this new initiative to the market even quicker without causing any damage to the athlete? We do benchmarking. On this image here, we use a traffic light system. But in UK sport, the traffic light system is not just red, amber, or green. We also have a fourth thing, which is gold, which is this particular thing that you are doing world leading? So it's no good anymore to be green. Green is acceptable. Gold is what we aspire to, is to be the best in the world. And if you take a sport like track cycling, you will see, if you benchmarked it, most of what it does would be gold. So we compare ourselves with the best sports, but we also look outside. What can we learn from music? What can we learn from the best surgeons? What do these people do that makes them the best in the world? And is there anything that we can take from playing the violin, playing the piano, doing heart transplants? Is there anything we can learn from these excellent people that translates into sport? And then just to keep people on their toes, every 4 years or sooner, there is what's known as the THC, the Talent Health Check. Every single sport will have its system independently reviewed to make sure it's as good as it can be and that weaknesses are being addressed. Pillar 5, athlete career and post-career support. I had a conversation with Leandro last night, and I said to him, is a salary of 92,000 real in Brazil a good salary? And he said, yeah, it's probably more than many people who are academics would earn. Well, one of the things that we do with our money, we give it to athletes so that they can live and train as full-time athletes and don't have to have a full-time job. And this has many benefits. They don't have to work. There's a recognition that rest is part of an athlete's preparation, so they can rest rather than work. They are available to go on overseas training camps. They are available to go on training camps domestically with the rest of the squad. So everybody is there at the same time doing high quality training. And this has made a massive difference. In the UK, that's probably about the average wage. So it's not living like a king, but it's a very significant contribution towards living costs. But the most important thing is that in addition to this, athletes also have access to support services valued at 55,000 a year. And that's primarily coaching, sports science, sport medicine, training camps. These are direct inputs to an athlete's career that will have a performance benefit in their sport. But we also have indirect inputs. So these last two, lifestyle support, making sure that athletes know how to eat properly, making sure that they can deal with sponsors and with the media. And we also build in post-career transition. What will these guys do when they have finished their careers? Are they going to go into coaching? Are they going into the media? Go back to university? Get a job with somebody? All the time we're thinking about life beyond sport, but trying to retain the talent and the knowledge that they have. This is pillar 6, And this is the indoor track at the English Institute of Sport in Sheffield, which Jessica Ennis trains on. As you can see, it's not particularly well utilised, but that's a problem. That's the expense of running elite sport. So we have a network of these facilities across England, and we also have a clustering of sports in certain areas. Manchester has the velodrome, which was so successful for the 2002 Commonwealth Games, and it's from that platform that we built track cycling into being the world-beating program that it is. And for some sports, there is this recognition that you need to have all of the squads together in the same place. It's on the battery. Are we back on? I think we're okay, Flavia. You still hear me at the back? Yeah, good stuff. And one of the One of the things that we've learned in this journey of imitation to innovation is to learn from the experiences of others. So Australia, in the early days of its system, concentrated everything in the Australian Institute of Sport. And that had problems. The distances to travel, to get to facilities, and particularly with athletes in early specialisation sports, the homesickness is a big problem. And we were going to have one centralised facility somewhere near Oxford. But this didn't happen. We, in the end, have a regional network. So no athlete travels more than 90 minutes, 2 hours to get to and from training at an elite facility. Pillar 7, coaching and coaching provision. The three biggest impacts on an athlete are human inputs. One, the athlete must have the desire himself. Second, he or she must have access to the best coaching. And third, there is the parental input. Now, I think Andrew Parsons said earlier today, we need good people desperately. And what he alluded to was the fact that there is a global market for elite sport coaching talent. So when we first started, as Hans said, we snapped up Aussies. So we had an Australian swimming director, we've got a Cuban judo performance director, we've had an East German rower, and in Shane Sutton, we have an Australian cycling coach. That's okay, it served us pretty well, but now we're beginning to realise that sustainability comes from growing your own. So now coaching is recognised as a profession. To be an elite coach, you need to have a level 4 qualification. And we pay good money. Many elite coaches earn more than the chief executive of their national governing body, because there's a global market for coaches, there is no global market for pen pushers. We have a career pathway to become an elite coach now, and as athletes retire who have coaching potential, we fast-track them into the system so that we're growing our own. And we also recognise athletes' achievements. Pictured here is David Brailsford. He's the performance director for British Cycling. And this is Dave picking up his CBE. This is an award from the Queen. So he's a commander of the British Empire. So remember the early slides I showed you about some nations use financial and status rewards for their athletes? We don't do this. We do now, I would say about David Brailsford that he studied for his MBA at Sheffield Hallam University, and he attributes much of what he does with the cycling program to the strategic management that he learned at our university. I'd like to say we taught him everything he knows, but that's not quite true, but we did make a small contribution. Pillar 8 is about national and international competition, and a lot of the money that we have is used to enable athletes to have the means to compete. And the example I want to give you here is sailing. If you want to take part in the World Sailing Championships in Australia, it will cost you £10,000 just to transport your boat. We have money in the budget to do this. This is part of the plan. This is the competitions we will go to. This is how much it will cost. We just do it, and the money's there. And we also bring events to the UK so that athletes can have the experience of competing in international competition. And I was only listening to the presentations this morning that I realised just how much of this you're doing in Brazil. Finally, Pillar 9, scientific research. Just a reminder, this was scientific research in SPLIS 1. You can see the UK score is below the sample average. This was a relative weakness. We have addressed it. There's no finer expression to describe what we do in scientific research and innovation than this words from David Brailsford. What he talks about is the aggregation of marginal gains. So a simple way to explain this is it's not doing one thing 100% better. It's doing 100 things 1% better. Massive attention to detail. So we now have an innovation team within UK Sport, which is led by a guy with a PhD in sports engineering. We have partnerships with industry. If we look at British Aerospace, this gives us access to military-grade technology that we can apply to sport. So whether it be carbon fibre wheelchairs, whether it be getting canoes and putting them through water tanks to do hydrodynamic experiments, whether it be wind tunnels for jet fighters that we can put cyclists in, the partnerships that we have leave many benefits for our engineering and innovation people that previously would not be available. My university is one of many universities which is an innovation partner for UK Sport. So we have a sports engineering lab, and our people had a hand in maybe 21 of the 65 medals in London 2012. And then British people are eccentric. Many people spend time in their garages or their sheds inventing things. So we incentivize these people. If they can invent something which gives us a performance gain in sport, they will be rewarded. And we hold competitions to find things that will give a performance gain. So everybody has the opportunity to contribute towards the elite sports system and this culture of innovation now. And what I want to do here is to show you how innovation has a positive impact on performance. What we're looking at here, these blue bars, this is the number of medals won in the traditional sports of athletics and swimming. So in 1984, 21 medals, progressively going down. But even when we start investing in Sydney, 6, 10, 9, no spectacular gains in athletics and swimming. Now, when we look at cycling, rowing and sailing, we see a very different picture. Now, I've got a question for you. What is the similarity between cycling, rowing, and sailing? Well, Hans had you all standing up. These are all sports which we excel in, where you sit down. You sit on a bike, you sit on a boat, and you sit down when you're sailing. And in the case of rowing, we sit down and we go backwards. These are the sports that we have chosen to specialize in. And these are the result. These are sports which respond very well to innovation. And just look at the difference that innovation has made now. So here, 2, 3, 4, 6 in Atlanta. Then in Sydney, 12, 13, and in Beijing and London, 26 medals in cycling, rowing and sailing. And there are far fewer medals available in these sports than there are in athletics and swimming. But that is the difference between innovation and imitation. Now to have a look at investment. It gets quicker now. But he didn't fly me over from London to listen to me for half an hour. Okay, let's have a look at investment. The first thing is the policy which underpins our investment is no compromise. If your sport performs, you'll be given the resources that you need to succeed in that sport. If you do not perform, then you will be punished, or you will not get any funding. So it's a very, very clear, strict rule. There is no compromise. We invest solely in Olympic and Paralympic sport. The funding decisions are based on previous results, future performance potential, and excellent governance within the national governing bodies. So all of these ingredients need to be in place. Here's a reminder of our investment, and I have to do something clever now, so I need to go to my computer. Well, it's not that clever. We have a hyperlink here. Now, you can't see this at the back, but I'll explain it to you very gently. What we're looking at here, this is the change in investment in 2012 to 2016. So the first important thing, investment has increased by 7%. So down here, we've gone from 264 million to 284 million. So an increase of 20 million pounds between London and Rio. Second point, some sports have been punished. This is descending order of the reduction in funding. Now, swimming. In Beijing, we won 6 gold medals, 2 of which were gold. In London, we won 3 medals, none of which were gold. So we lost 2 gold medals and half the medal tally. Swimming, minus 3.7 million. The sports that we funded for the London 2012, which we are rubbish at, handball, volleyball, basketball, wrestling, all had very, very big cuts. Table tennis, 100% cut. All of its funding gone. So what you can see here is that clearly there is sanction. If you fail, you will be punished. But on a positive note, if you succeed, you will be rewarded. And at the bottom here, the sports that did well, the sitting down sports, canoeing, cycling, equestrian, rowing, all had much bigger increases than 7%. So you can see there's a clear system of sanction and reward. Now we need to go back and link to the other presentation. So I've shown you the change in medals in the traditional sports and the sitting down sports. Now I'll show you the change in funding. So this is funding for athletics and swimming, and you can see in the Rio cycle it's actually come down 50 million in London, 48 million for Rio. But let's have a look at the successful sports. You can see the gap increasing, 87.7 million going into cycling, rowing and sailing for the Rio cycle. That's what happens when you do the right things in the UK at present. Now I want to look at the cost effectiveness of medals. How much do these medals cost? Let's ignore Sydney and Athens because these figures are not quite right. But in Beijing, 47 medals at a cost of 5 million. London, 65 medals at a cost of 4.06 million. And in Rio, if we hit the target of 66 medals in total, that will be 4.3 million pounds per medal. You can build a lot of hospitals for that. Now performance. This is the GB, the invincible GB sprint cycling team. This you've seen, this is the third time now, so you get the message. In the UK, more money in equals more medals out. But what I want to do is to break this down by gender. And this is the performance of men against women for the UK. Now, there's a different number of events for men and women, so the way we standardize it is to use percentages. So this is like-for-like comparison. Let's start here in 1984. In 1984, the success of men and women was about the same. But you can see, as we progressed towards Atlanta, women were getting worse at a faster rate than men. The men were in decline, but kind of holding up a bit. When we first made the investment, 96 to 2000, women improved a little bit, men improved quite a lot. And then you can see women have improved dramatically, and men even more so. So what we've done is we have reduced the decline in women's sport and then taken it to a new level. Now if we do something similar for China or Australia, everyone thinks China is very good at the Olympic Games, everyone thinks Australia is very good at the Olympic Games. What those two nations are good at, particularly China, is women's events in the Olympic Games. China's men win very few medals. So what they have done is they've targeted women's sport. And it was a similar way in Australia. That, I don't want to dig a hole for myself, but maybe there are some people who think women's medals are easier to win than men's. Whatever the explanation is, the reality is that when nations improve by taking a strategic approach, it tends to be through women's sport. And in GB, certainly you can see massive recovery and improvement compared with Atlanta. Now you can't see this, so I'll be quick. The point I want to make here is this is number of gold medals against number of total medals by sport. And the key point is cycling, track, rowing, athletics and boxing contribute 18 out of 29 gold medals. 18 out of 29, 62% gold medals from 4 disciplines. And then if we look at total medals, so if we come down this way, rowing, cycling, athletics, boxing and sailing, these 5 sports or disciplines contribute 52% of all medals. All the other sports down here, minor contributions. And a point I want to make is that it's difficult for nations to improve. When we look at the change in medals won, this is the change between London and Beijing. This is athletics here. Increase of 3 gold medals and 2 medals in total. No sport in London improved its gold medals won by more than 3. So there's lots of contributions from various sports here. These sports, these are the losers. Sailing, -3 gold medals. Swimming, -2 gold medals. For every medal that you lose, you have to win one somewhere else just to stand still. So we had 10 games. We went from 19 to 29 gold medals. So here we have a gain of 15 offset against a loss of 5. 15 minus 5 is the 10 gain that we had. But you can see it's a minority of sports that lead the way in improvement. This is very important implications for focus sports or a diversity approach. Now, host nation effects. This is good news for Brazil. This is the performance of the last 7 hosts, so since 1988. Every single host has increased gold medals won. Every single host, except America in '96, has increased total medals won. Every single host has increased the number of sports it's won medals in. And every host has increased the number of disciplines it is medalled in. So, cycling is one sport. Within cycling, there is track, there is road, there is BMX, there's mountain bike. So that's the difference between sport and discipline. And every nation has improved its medal table rank by at least 1 place. So, on paper, this is good news for Brazil. But what I would say to you, it's not something that's handed to you on a plate. You have to earn it. Now, I think that I've made a career standing up and saying that performance in the Olympic Games is predictable. So this is what I predicted for Team GB. This is what happened in practice, and this is how accurate we were. So we said 27 gold medals. People said I was mad. I obviously wasn't mad enough because it was too short. So 93% accuracy, 86% for total medals, 94%, 86% for disciplines medals won in, and 100% for calling 3rd place. And it's not because I'm clever, it's because the data that's there occurs so consistently that it's almost predictable. So, on to Brazil. This is Brazil from Antwerp in 1920 through to London 2012. I think this was the first time Brazil ever achieved, this is the first time Brazil's ever achieved double figures in medals, and has managed to do so in the last 5 editions. But what you can see is a fairly random pattern. Here, down, down, up, down, down, up, up. There's no pattern. It's not like the UK. This is a plot of the change in medals by nation in London 2012, change in gold medals and change in total medals. So Brazil, very near the origin, no change in gold medals, +2 overall. And why I think this is predictable is if we say, well, let's put some lines in ±5 gold medals, you can see pretty much everyone is contained within that. And if we do ±10 medals overall, you see everything is contained pretty much within that. So who are the outliers? Well, the two that I would pick up. One, Team GB, the host nation, the most improved nation. Over here, China. China still had a very good London Olympics. It was its second best performance ever, but still, it lost gold medals and total medals. So by rights, we'd expect in 2016, Team GB to be in this quadrant here. If we win 66 medals, it won't be 29 gold, but if we were to win 66, we might avoid getting in here, in the losers quadrant. This is Brazil's performance by sport. And there's kind of one or two kind of trends that come out here. Sailing is identified as Brazil's most successful sport. 6 gold medals, 17 in total. So somebody looking in from the outside might think, oh yeah, Brazil, they have a very good sailing program. They consistently produce good sailors. But the reality is Robert Scheidt and Lars Grail, they've won more than half of those medals. We go down to, say, volleyball. Volleyball, Brazil's very good, apart from snatching defeat from the jaws of victory in London 2012. But you can be as good as you like at volleyball, but you can only contest 2 medals, one in the men, one in the women's. So let's say 2016, Brazil wins 2 gold medals in football, 2 gold medals in volleyball, 2 gold medals in indoor volleyball. 6 gold medals. That's fantastic. China will win that many in diving. This is the problem you have. You choose sports where you can only contest a few medals, or there's very few medals which are available for you to win. You've yet to win a gold medal in football. And you're also a bit like the UK, that the proportion of medals that you win, the gold proportion is quite low, like it was for us before we started investing. So maybe you're polite after you. So my concern is that I don't see where the growth is coming from in Brazil's medal winning capability at the moment. Perhaps someone can put me right. So, this is it. This is where I try and achieve redemption from my lousy forecasts of 2012. The method that I use is simple linear regression of performance over time plus a quantifiable host nation benefit. So the simple regression says that in 2016, on a business as usual basis, Brazil will win 4 gold medals. But being the host nation is not business as usual. There is a quantifiable effect which, since 1988, has been worth about 3% of all of the gold medals contested. So in round numbers, that's an additional 10. So the regression says 4, the host nation advantage says 10. So the forecast using my model should be 14 gold medals for Brazil. Now let me say here, this is not something I'm comfortable with. and I'll explain to you why in a minute. If we do the same thing for total medals, then we see the regression suggests 18 medals, so very similar to London. But the host nation advantage suggests an additional 15 medals, so 33 medals in total. And again, this is something that I'm not entirely comfortable with. And this is why I'm not comfortable. Because when you subject the forecast from the model to a test of reasonableness, you would expect the model and the test of reasonableness to be broadly the same. So, for example, the test of reasonableness is this. Historically, host nations win 52% more gold medals than they did in the previous edition, and they win 26% more total medals than previously. Now, had I applied the test of reasonableness to Team GB in London, 19 medals in Beijing, plus 52% equal 29 gold medals. The test of reasonableness would have been perfect. So don't waste your time with linear regressions and models and things. But for Brazil, the problem that I have is the model says 14, the test of reasonableness says 5, and so we have a variance of 9. That's a big variance on gold medals. And similarly, for total medals, the model says 33, the test of reasonableness 21, and there's a big variation there. So, I have to stick my neck out and say, well, what's it going to be? And I think that what I heard from Cassia yesterday, 10th place in the medal table. To achieve 10th place will probably take 7 or 8 gold medals and maybe 25 medals in total, something like that. So I think that these are reasonable limits, that anything around 5 or less than 5 would be a big disappointment, and anything above 14 would be a big surprise. So my forecast would be that what Brazil will achieve will be within these bounds, but towards the top end. It will be sufficient maybe to get into the top 10, which is probably somewhere between 7 and 9 gold medals, something like that, depending on how the other nations perform. So, points to take away. We can finish up now. There are 5 points. What are the ingredients of a successful elite sport development system? Well, the first one of these is time. That the journey that I've shown you with the UK has been a journey that's taken 30 years to achieve. From not having a policy to planning to come forth in the medals table. So like Football Manager, the one thing they need and they never get before they get sacked is time. So too you need time to develop the system. The second thing is you need money. Lots of money. And when you first start investing, you may well find more money in equals more medals out. How we have improved and achieved competitive advantage is this move from imitation, so copying what other people do, to innovation, which is doing things that only we do and only we know about, and which give us genuine performance gains. And it was very frustrating after Beijing when we did so well. The UK went from a position of, yes, we want to learn from other nations, we want to be part of SPLIS, to one of, why should we share our secrets with the world? That's the truth. The fourth thing is we have a commitment to continuous improvement. And what I showed you on Pillar 4 and Pillar 9, I hope is clear evidence of how perceived weaknesses can be converted into strengths. So for Rio 2016, Team GB target 66 medals, something which has never been done before. For Brazil, I can confidently stand in front of you and predict that Brazil will have its best Olympic Games ever, with something like 7 to 9 gold medals and maybe 25 to 30 medals in total. Be very disappointed if we don't achieve within those sorts of parameters. So on that very happy note, I look forward to the debrief after Rio 2016. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you.
Ok, a gente já tem algumas perguntas aqui. A primeira delas, aliás, são duas, eu vou juntar numa só, porque se referem à mesma temática. Sobre a importância do esporte escolar, da educação física e também de jogos escolares no processo de detecção de talentos esportivos.
Okay, that's a really good question. I think what I showed you in Pillar 3, in the relationship between grassroots participation, which was flatlining, and medals, which was increasing, is that there is not much of a relationship between grassroots and elite sports success. School sport, we try and enable children to have access to 120 minutes of high quality PE per week. But this is enough physical activity to derive a small health benefit. The person who asked the question asked about the school games.
Desculpa, eu não falei o nome, foi o André Arantes.
Okay. The school games happens at 4 levels. We have intra-school sport. We have inter-school sport, where one school will play against another school. And we have what are known as county festivals. The county is like a municipality, a big municipality. The level 4, the elite school games. These children are not taken out of the schools. These are the young world-class talent squads that have been identified by national governing bodies. So even at school level, we don't rely on this continuous filtration of talent. We look for the people who have the skills and attributes that we want. We pick them out and put them into an NGB system. Does that answer your question?
Okay.
Bom, tem uma outra pergunta aqui do André, especificamente sobre uma modalidade. Por que o triatlo, que ganhou 2 medalhas em 2012, teve apenas um aumento de 4%?
We were very pleased to win two medals by the Johnny and Alistair Brownlee. But the target was more ambitious than this. We should also have won a medal in the women's. But our women athlete was not particularly well on the day. And the athletes in 1 to 4 worked together to break her. And she was eventually in 5th place. And that wasn't good enough. We had targeted 1 medal in the men's and a medal in the women's. None of the other women performed. So 4% increase in triathlon sends out a signal to the sport. We value what you did in the men's, but the women's wasn't good enough. And had you not won 2 medals in the men, you'd have been looking at a cut. So when I say there is a clear system of sanction and reward, there is probably no finer example than the one that you've chosen of triathlon. Is that okay?
Temos mais uma pergunta, que eu vou tentar dar uma resumida, mas na verdade qual a sua visão sobre qual impacto teria o fato do Brasil especificamente organizar um campeonato mundial de futebol 2 anos antes dos Jogos Olímpicos, e até que ponto os investimentos aí vão se difundir, podem impactar, por exemplo, nos seus cálculos.
Okay, another good question, because I've been thinking about this one. And I was trying to think, in the modern era, is there a nation which has done anything similar? And the closest that there is West Germany, who hosted the Olympics in '72 and the World Cup in '74. So obviously the other way around to Brazil. My worry about Brazil is that it will spend too much time worrying about 2014, and then when 2014 has been and gone, the following day people will wake up and think, oh my God, we've got 2 years to organise the Olympic Games. And it will be too late. So, again, this is something which resonates with what Cassia was saying yesterday. This is an opportunity you cannot afford to miss. I don't think we'll see the Olympic Games in the UK in my lifetime. I'm actually only 26, but I just look old. So realistically, it's an opportunity which presents itself once in a lifetime. You have to seize it. And when you hand over the banner to probably Tokyo, you have no regrets. Okay?
Nós agradecemos mais uma vez a palestra brilhante, a colaboração e as suas considerações. Eu vou convidar a mestranda Cacilda Amaral para entregar uma lembrança e agradecer mais uma vez a sua contribuição. Bom, e a todos nós, um bom descanso merecido. Acho que tivemos uma maratona positiva hoje e amanhã retornamos então às 8h30 para uma nova rodada, a última palestra internacional e depois falar um pouquinho sobre os resultados do Espírito Brasil. Até amanhã.
Okay. Thank you. See you tomorrow.